It is March 11th, 2015. And I was just talking about Mike Tanzer and how he did play sickle to me when I was in Washington State, and that my feeling or my belief at the time was that the only reason he was calling is because he wanted to. Well, I thought he was going to do one of these things that where they have FBI listening in and they kind of coach him, or they have a preset idea of what he wants to say, and then he wants to try to minimize what he did with me, or make it sound like I was just ready and willing to talk to him, no problem, like he'd never done anything wrong, and I didn't have any reservations about anything. And I didn't call him back. For one reason, was because of the FBI, and for the second, I felt they wanted to do like an entrapment scheme type of a deal. Not that I had done anything criminal myself, but just trying to play off all of their people. And then the other reason I didn't call is because I didn't feel comfortable talking to him, after what he'd done. And I still felt really bad about everything that had happened and recognized that something was really wrong with that. I mean, I knew that it was rape, but I hadn't fully processed. I wasn't like wanting to go through and think about how, oh yeah, I remember him from my past and his parents and family and how I'm connected to them and that kind of thing. I wasn't processing all of that at that time because I really couldn't handle it at that time. I didn't have time to think about it because I was trying to figure out why my lawsuits were getting screwed up and why I wasn't getting my personal injury money, or why that was getting held up a little bit. It wasn't that I wasn't going to get it, because it's pretty much guaranteed that I would, as long as I just followed through with the settlement type of a deal with it. But I was having a real problem with it, and the people who were in charge of that on the adversarial side, it was Donna Sierra Milla, who I was already familiar with. She's part of the United States Justice Department. She's not just an insurance person. And the other person is also part of the United States government, and that was Roger Harris. He was supposed to be my attorney, and he was not acting in my best interest. I don't think that he wanted me to get that $50,000. I think that it's possible. Well, first of all, he was the U.S. government, so if he was also working for the FBI or Department of Justice, and he was in direct business with people who were in the FBI. So if they didn't want me to pursue some of those lawsuits, if they wanted me to be defamed or sound discredited on these various claims that I'd had, as a kid and everything else, they'd just have me lose. Because I think the main motive has been to just keep me as poor as possible, as crazy sounding as possible, and being poor makes it harder to get ahead and show that you're not crazy, because if you're not in a stable job, or if you're not doing well in college or being successful at the lawsuits that you're pursuing, you can look unstable. And as long as my college was going fine, and I was doing a good job with my lawsuits, I was fine. Had I won those lawsuits, it would have been really an incredible win for me. It would have been it was the only way that I was protecting my own name and my rights, because for decades the United States had lied about me. And one of my cases was about defamation of character, and they had published a horrible article about me. It made me sound crazy. And I knew that it would be damaging to my future, and it was, because when I later had my baby boy, I named Oliver, the government and Canada, when I went to Canada, used that same article against me. And had I won the lawsuit, had I not been forced out of it and blocked from it, I would have been able to say, yeah, this does sound crazy, doesn't it? And I actually won a lawsuit of defamation against these people. And, everything could have turned around for me at that point. It was probably the most significant time in my life that I had a chance to get ahead a little bit. And the government directly interfered again to keep me down and to keep themselves in a power position over me, of control, and everything that they have done since that happened has been bad. They have kidnapped 2 more of my babies from me. They've made claims of mental illness again. They have stolen all of my records, my personal documentation, including all of my sentimental photos and records and diaries and everything. They blocked me from work, blocked me from housing, and everything bad that you can possibly do to someone, they did, including putting me in a vulnerable position, and then also using more of their agents to stalk me and rape me again. So I feel that I don't have any personal regrets with what I've done myself, because what I did at that time was a very filing those lawsuits was important, and I did a good job. I did the best that I could do under the circumstances, and they were at least being respected enough to be held up in court. And so I do feel proud of my work and what I tried to do for myself and for my babies that I've already had and for the ones that I was going to have. And this government is just really a piece of shit. And what they've done to me, they've just gotten away with, year after year after year. They've done some of the worst things that you can possibly do to someone. And just targeted me every way that they can. So, so anyway, that's what happened with that. And I haven't really had a chance ever since then. Because that was my chance. And no one was going to stand up for me except for me. So all of their really bullshit about how I would just get raped and how it's just terrible if you went for a person trying to do it themselves, try to get ahead themselves, or try to break away from some corrupted government group. Basically just prove that they're shits over and over. I mean, none of them were coming to my defense. They were not validating me. They were not saying that I was not mentally ill. They were not apologizing. They were not admitting that they were wrong. Even though they'd accused me of being Anna, the Russian spy, for decades and told all these people this, and put it in internal records and investigations against me, tortured me over it. And then they bring out their Anna Chapman and send her back to Russia. No apology to me whatsoever for the times that they used that as one of the excuses to harm me. No one was standing up for me except for myself. And I did actually try to find lawyers that would take a case, and none of these attorneys, I called so many different attorneys, and none of them were wanting to take a case against the United States government. Possibly I could have found someone if I had had $50,000 to work with, and a little bit of that I could have used to hire a private attorney and maybe work on it myself a little, but otherwise, I was getting pretty much surrounded by government. All of my jobs that I was hired for were pretty much through the government, and then they would turn around and give me bad references. So, they would isolate me, make sure no one else could hire me. And so they would hire me, and then if they got mad at me, or they didn't want me to get ahead, or they wanted to keep me down at certain times in my life, they'd just make sure they spread a bunch of crap around about me. And so that made it pretty much impossible for me to even get work anywhere else. Because people started wondering, how come I had just a series of, short-term positions, which basically were the result of getting hired by the government and dumped by the government repeatedly. And, I think just to create a bad impression and work history for me, because I didn't just quit jobs. It wasn't that I couldn't hold a job. Well, I did quit some of these jobs because some of them were, I realized, were government jobs, and I wasn't going anywhere with them. But even as a kid, when I wasn't even getting paid by the government, they were promising to pay me all the time. They never paid me, but they made me work for them. It was like being a complete hostage. I worked for several departments of the United States, and I wasn't paid anything. So, anyway, back to Mike Tanzer. That is one time that he did try to call, and I didn't talk to him. And anyway, aside from that, I want to also go back and talk about, since I've mentioned this Erica Ballinger, who I've alleged had facilitated rapes of me by Robin Bechtold and also by Mike Tanzer. She happened to show up with Mike when I met him at the club, and she was also present for the second rape of me by Robin. Well, there was a little more that went into that, because the rapes that Robin committed against me, the two that that I've talked about, I forgot to mention some other things that went into that, because that had been premeditated ahead of time, going all the way back to when I was a kid, like age 11 and 12. And the individuals who were involved in premeditating those rapes against me were a pretty large collection of United States government employees and their kids. And their kids, were just kids at the time, but some of them were standing around, and they were actually being asked to be part of this when I was a young girl. And so they premeditated when they were going to rape me, the kind of trigger and cues they were going to use before having me raped, and who was going to be involved, and all of the same people showed up for it. And I want to describe exactly what they did and how they were organizing this, and why I know that they were all connected to the United States Department of Justice and FBI. And I will do that in the next video, which might be on a different date, because I don't really necessarily feel like talking about it right now. And that will be the next thing I talk about. If there's anything else I missed about Mike, I'll bring that up. But, and then I will talk about the next rape that was committed against me by a government, the next one that I want to talk about at least. That was a government employee who knew me when I was a kid and planned to do harm to me later, and did, and got away with it because the United States government has been encouraging this.